Greetings! Welcome to the Week 11 Early Access Update for Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off, as always, with a sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Awesome. So, what do we got this week? Well, we've got a different sort of new toy this week. Not a new firearm, but a new, and the first for the game, real agent. Basically, I bit off a little more than I could chew this week in terms of getting things ready, so it's still in a very rough state, but I have both a new environment that's work in progress for you, and a new reactive agent that I have named Clunk. So if you'd like to see Clunk, one of the two ways that you can do that is that in the breaching scene here, in addition to our IPSC sequence and our hot dogs here, we now have a third option, spawn robots. So I'm going to do that here. And there aren't going to be any in sight, thankfully, right when we get up. I'm going to go ahead and sneak over to the first one. I'm going to duck down just so that the one over here doesn't see me. There we go. And I'm going to use this to finally position myself. I'm going to switch over to lefty here. So basically, well, I'll just go ahead and engage him, and then I'll describe how he works afterwards. So let's peek around here. He's going to be awfully mad. Oh, goodness. There we go. So this Clunk is disabled. So what he is basically a sort of target tank that is, built as sort of inspired by the ideas if you actually wanted to create a sort of robot target that you could fight in real life with something, as powerful as a real firearm. So he's got that looks like maybe 1.5 to 2-inch steel plate on him. And the only place that you can damage him, let's teleport over here, is on his top target here is what disables him. It requires 5 shots to bring down. And though you can't see it right now, he's got a lower target, sort of the nutshot target, that will disable his locomotion, not his aiming, just his sort of translative locomotion for 10 seconds, and then that part of the target resets. So yeah, so there are 4 or 5 of them in this environment here. So we're going to, let's slam in a new mag just in case. Pop around over here. All right. Oh, he's mad. Ooh. There we go. So as you can see, his behavior is pretty simple right now. He basically has a network of sensors, a sort of short-range omnidirectional one, and 3 invisible directional ones, which will eventually be represented as their own targets on him. And he basically sort of moves towards you, firing, and you can sort of if you can break line of sight for more than about 4 or 5 seconds, he'll still move to investigate where you were, but he'll stop shooting. So yeah. So let's go ahead and pop over to the environment that I'm really building for him, because this environment's a little too tight for something like this to work really well, especially with all the props I have thrown in here. But the new environment's perfect for him. Wonderful. So here we are in the new environment. As you can see, it's visually themed the same way as the Gunnasium, the first Gunnasium test, that is. But it's significantly larger. I believe it's about 50 or 60 meters on one dimension, about 40 on another. And the purpose of this environment is severalfold. For one, I needed a more open, interesting, sort of traversable space to really start testing agents in. And I wanted to make sure it was large enough to both have sort of long pathing, sort of pathfinding for the tank-based agents, and some space to fly for the eventual hovering agents that I want to do. The other reason that it's this large is that obviously the teleportation experiment that I added last week, works well in a scene as small as the breaching scene, but I didn't really have a notion of whether it would hold up as a modality in a larger arena. And so let's get moving here. So I believe our first Clunk robot is around this corner here. Let's make sure we're set up. I definitely recommend, if you're going to be engaging him in here, that you have an amplifier on whatever weapon you're going to be using, as he can see further than you can likely hit off of irons, unless you're one of the several ridiculously good at this game folk who are maxed out on the modular range boards. So let's peek around this corner here. Just so you know, regular teleportation on the touchpad is still active, so if you want to be really precise about getting yourself up to a corner or an area, let's peek around. Oh. Let's try flanking around. There we go. Whew. So yeah, so there's 5 or 6 of him in this environment. Let's get some altitude so we can actually get a really good view. Space. Oh, one of them. Oh, shoot. That's cheap. There we go. So yeah, so there's 3 different levels to this space. A whole bunch of room. Oh. Clunk has a bit of a weakness. He's totally blind, completely from the. Oh shoot! He saw the other way. So, even though I'm dodging here, just so you know, nothing major happens when you get hit. I haven't implemented that full logic yet, as frankly put, I'm still deciding on what's going to feel fun and not irritating. I'm probably just going to teleport you back to the beginning, basically after I film this, but before I push the build tonight, and probably next week get around to implementing something a little closer to an armor, hitbox, and life system. So yeah, in terms of the environment as well, as you can see, it's still very, very sparse. It's just the level geo. I didn't get around to actually placing things like cover and destructible props and climbing handles yet. My plan is to make this space a sort of omni-usage kind of space, where you're going to be able to spawn sequences that are pure Gunnasium, meaning nothing firing at you. It's just about climbing and traversing, and hitting the sort of hand targets, some of them with the Glock, some of them without, as well as creating a different sort of battle arena for the different agents that I make over the coming weeks. So as I said before, things are a little more work in progress this week than I tend to like them to be. But yeah, working on Clunk took a little more effort than I expected it to take. So let's go ahead and jump out of the headset and talk about what we're going to be working on this week.
Yo! Whew, out of the headset and exhausted. This has been a bit of a trying week, getting Clunk up and running, as I mentioned before. A little background, actually, on the way that he's put together. Obviously, most of the game agents that we encounter in games have a very, very simple perception and cognition model, if they have a cognition model at all. And it's something that's always bothered me, especially in games where you have a lot of agility in an environment and have an ability to manipulate where you're standing and how you're fighting. Most of the agents that we encounter in first-person shooters, especially in the single-player games nowadays that are basically just like a linear corridor movie in many ways, are a lot of set dressing, a lot of cool animations and sounds and call-outs, but their underlying behavior is very simple, which means that the expressivity that you have engaging them is very limited. And this is something that's always bothered me. And so prior to doing H3, I had actually been working on a game prototype for about 3.5 months. It was a sort of cyberpunk first-person shooter with a very, very complex agent model. There was actually there were robots as well, and it was a networked system of robot pieces. So sensors and locomotion and the sort of main computer and the weaponry, instead of all being handled by a unified abstraction, were actually separate pieces. They could be damaged separately, the communication between them could be damaged as well, and each of the, even vision of the environment was handled by individual sensor cones and vision check loops. So it allowed you to actually ambush agents and partially disable their vision. You could mess with them with things like, smoke grenades and things like that. And so I've been adapting a lot of the work that I did on that prototype and bringing it over to H3 to make some interesting agents to fight. Obviously, Clunk is still very clunky in the head. He's not smart, and most of his eventual behaviors are not filled in or activated. I've migrated over a ton of code, but most of it is commented out, just because there's a lot more nuance that I need to work on before I can bring it online. So I hope that you don't judge him by how he works this week. I have big plans for him and the other agents. So as for this coming week, this week is going to be largely about refinement and filling a number of things out. The new environment is actually going to be filled out with cover and handholds. I really want, as I build these different locomotion experiments, the grabbing, the standard teleport, the new teleport button, I really want to make sure that all of them are available to you at a given time in any combination. Both to just accommodate folks who are more or less prone to simulation sickness, and because I think having those multiple modalities at once makes you capable of so much more agility in a given challenge situation, and I find that super interesting. So expect the new environment to be really filled out with ladders and handholds and things like that. Might do a zip line, although that might be a little, nauseating. But yeah. And as for, in terms of other things this week, I know there's a number of standing bugs, as well as the attachment system is way clunkier than it needs to be. I played with it for another week just to see what would be right. I haven't modified the actual pushed version of it this week, but I'm in the process of adding a bunch of visual indication to let you know when you're hovering over an attachment point and sort of eventually what state an attachment is in. Yeah, because I know a bunch of people have been having trouble turning on the flashlights and the laser pointers, and that's just unacceptable. So next week that will all be, I'll give that all another pass. So yeah, so I hope you have fun playing around with Clunk, and I will see you all next week. Peace.